When you still believe that the person inside your car loves you, you may still hear the sound of it driving away. The tires made a crackling sound on the gravel. The warm Italian air drowned out his pal's laughter, and he was gone in an instant. I continued to believe that we were having a disagreement while I stood there, my mouth hanging open in the middle of a sentence, still thinking that after he calmed down, he would go back. It always went like that. The taillights vanished around the turn this time. I was also by myself. As part of a reunion vacation with his college pals, we had been seeing Italy. Gabriel invited me along at the last minute, like a +1 to a party he wasn't sure he wanted to go to. Even though I wasn't meant to be there, they had insisted it was a guy's thing. He had too much to drink that afternoon. Once more, I had politely requested that he pause at the third glass of wine during lunch. It wasn't warmly received by him. His friends didn't either. In particular, Pete scoffed. Man, she's always trying to control you. We're here to have fun, so hurry up, have fun. That phrase always meant to grin and be quiet. I begged him to calm down and return to the hotel while we argued outside a tiny cafe. His fury was fierce, but his words were slurred. Your passport is in your purse, right? He asked, confused. I nodded. You'll figure it out after that. You're so intelligent that you always give me instructions. He slammed the car door after that and took off in a car. I stood motionless for a long time. I thought it was a joke, that Gabriel was teaching me who had the last say, and that this was just another one of his teachings. With their forks stopped halfway to their mouths, locals observed in silence from sidewalk tables. However, nobody spoke. I had 80 euros, not fully charged. Additionally, I had no notion how to pronounce the town's name where I was standing. Night came quickly. The picture-perfect structures and cobblestone alleyways were engulfed by shadows. That morning's charming European dream seemed like a trap with no way out. I could barely afford a room above a bakery as a pensione. It had a soapy and yeasty smell. There was no hot water and a sink in the corner. However, it was a roof. My attempt to reach Gabriel ended up in voicemail. There are 27 calls. There were 27 silences. I gave Pete a call. Blocked. Marco blocked. Each and every one. Not a single message. Not one, how are you? Not even a falsehood. It wasn't an error. It was a prelude. The shock had become ingrained in my bones by dawn, in the hopes that they would realize this had gone too far. I strolled around the outside of town, looking at hotel lobbies and tour buses. They hadn't. Florence was already their home. While using Wi-Fi at a cafe, I noticed a tagged photo on one of their social media profiles. They abandoned me like misplaced luggage. I was given an espresso by a cafe owner. Free. Kindness without words. He told me to go to the police in shaky English. The first submitted a report. The cop seems unsurprised. I only received a sympathetic nod. I spent an hour that afternoon gazing at the pawn shop window before entering. Gabriel put me the 2-carat diamond ring on my finger on our 5th anniversary, and it slowly came off. Not with fanfare. Out of necessity. The shopkeeper gave a far lower price than it was worth. I accepted it. For a bus ticket, it was sufficient. Rome. Somewhere. America. The pawn trader inquired. Family. I gave a robotic nod. However, I knew deep down that I wasn't calling anyone. When my mother said, I told you so, I wasn't prepared, or the silent sympathy of my friends. They were aware of the warning signs. I had made ornaments out of them. I went to the station on foot. Places I had only heard about in travel magazines flickered on the board. When the ticket counter woman inquired, Where do you go? I uttered the first word that made me feel as far away from him as possible. Greece. It wasn't something I planned, did not do any research. Didn't consider. I simply went. A long, dusty road, a bus, a boat. My feet were blistered by my sandals. My phone died, and so did the me who had minimized herself for 10 years. The sun was sinking behind olive orchards and whitewashed houses when I finally staggered off the last bus into a sleepy seaside village. I wasn't planning, not Greek, no map, just this. I had no intention of returning. not now. And for some reason, that was sufficient to continue walking. In Greece, the sun is harsh. It carries weight like the truth, unflinching but not unkind. I hadn't had any food in more than a day. I had no water left in my bottle. My heels were bleeding profusely from my lovely, strappy sandals, which were designed for walks in cobblestone squares. I continued to walk, beyond the village's edge, where the hills started to rise and the buildings became thinner. I can't recall why. Perhaps I reasoned that I wouldn't have to feel if I simply kept going. The body, however, always catches up. The truth is always there. My knees gave way. The road whirled. The olive trees, with their silver-green leaves gleaming like coins in a breeze, were the last thing I saw before I hit the ground. Then, nothing. I heard a voice first, gentle, persistent. Then I was gently turned onto my back by warm, worn hands. I blinked. Her face was as honest and lined as the soil itself, and her eyes were big with worry. "Kira Phosmo," she murmured. Her tone didn't need to be translated into a language I didn't understand. She put a metal canteen to my lips, raised my head, and massaged my cheeks. The flavor of water was like rescue. "Elena," she referred to herself. I made an effort to talk. Before I could speak, my throat had to work. "Alexis," I said in a whisper. She grinned, then he gestured toward the hill. Home. Her modest but proud home was a stone farmhouse nestled among olive trees. From the way the herbs hung drying from the rafters, you could tell by the table's weathered wood, by the aroma of something rich, flavorful, and alive cooking on the stove. I was seated by her, called out a name. Nikos, a quiet, sun-darkened man with a silver mustache and strong, weary eyes stepped in. Her spouse. He didn't say much, but gave a single nod, as if a choice had been made. Elena gave me a bowl of soup. I didn't inquire about its contents. My gut spoke for me. I slept in a spare room that night, with a homemade quilt, a narrow bed, and silence. Not quiet. Silence. The kind that you feel rather than hear. I awoke the following morning to the fragrance of bread and roosters. At the foot of the bed were clean, soft cotton clothing that were toasty from the sun, despite being a touch large. Elena smiled when she saw me in the kitchen. She served bread with honey and oil and poured rich coffee. I didn't feel like I was surviving for the first time in days. I was held. I did my best to explain, using motions, a translation tool, and terrible English. I wanted to express my gratitude to her, that I would depart shortly, that this was unexpected. However, Elena walked ahead of me as I scooped up my bag and headed for the door. Not with force. However, her gaze stopped me more than her fingers did. She gave a head shake, pointed to my still blistered feet. Then it started to rain outside the window. "Remain," she said plainly. One of the few words she knew in English. "Take a nap." 2 days later, I made another attempt to depart. "Put on your shoes. The bag is packed." She used a picture to stop me. In fact, a box of them, an antique black and white. A young lady with eyes like Elena's. She was holding a baby. "Sophia," she remarked in a quiet voice. "Grandbaby, Australia." She pretended to rock a youngster. Then she gestured toward her chest. Then to me. I took some time. Then I realized, though, I reminded her of her daughter. Spotted an area where someone used to belong, and I didn't feel used in any way. I had a sense of selection. I put my handbag down, inhaled deeply, and remained. The days that followed fell into rhythm. I learned how to collect eggs from hens without frightening them. From Elena, how to hang clothes so that it is perfectly caught by the breeze. I learned from Nikos to distinguish between herbs and weeds in the garden. Even when I pulled the wrong ones, he never got tired of me. We sat on the porch at night. She knitted. He smoked a pipe. I observed the sky's hue changes. Nobody made any requests. My presence was all that anyone required from me. And something inside of me started to sprout back in that silence. Not the person I used to be. She had left. However, something fresh. I still cry occasionally. In the room, alone, behind the shed, in the garden. I wept for the girl who had believed that her marriage was a secure environment, who believed that being needed was equivalent to being loved. For the ring I pawned, I wept. For the profession I gave up. For the way Gabriel had taught me to gradually shrink in order to maintain harmony. However, primarily, I sobbed because I wasn't prepared to go. Additionally, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't weak because of that. It forced me to be honest. Elena never made any requests for assurances. She made no mention of the future. She didn't inquire about history. One morning, long before the sun had risen, she simply gave me a pair of boots and said, "Work, not a drama, no justification, just a purpose." Together, we strolled to the olive grove. The mountainside was lined with gentle rows of trees that were older than any tale I could conjure. Elena gestured toward the branches. "Eli's," she said, "olives." She then demonstrated for me how to use large wooden combs to gently scrape the limbs, encouraging the fruit to fall onto the nets below. Not pulling, not in a hurry. This was listening, not harvesting. My initial attempt was awkward. I sent down leaves, twigs, and very few olives. Nico silently observed before showing me once again. My shoulders hurt by the middle of the morning. I developed blisters on my hands. My back was drenched in sweat. I wasn't used to having to prove myself with my body rather than my credentials. I winced as I removed the gloves, and Elena saw it. She did not chastise. She went into the house and came back with a tiny tin, a homemade salve made with oil, beeswax, and herbs. She softly massaged it into my hands. Then, without passing judgment, better tomorrow. She was also correct. The beat became easier every day. Prior to breakfast, work, lunch beneath the tree's shade, candlelight dinner in the kitchen. I developed the ability to distinguish between good and terrible olives, how to knot herb bundles with the proper amount of tension to ensure equal drying, how not to spill a drop of water while carrying it up from the well. My body transformed bit by little. The muscles that were previously exclusively used for Pilates exercises solidified. My back adapted to the weight and stopped hurting. I got a tan. I lost weight. I didn't get any smaller. I improved. Evenings took on a hallowed quality. Elena would knit. Nikos used to smoke or read aloud in Greek from old newspapers. I would sit peacefully in between them, allowing the silence to be maintained by their presence. I occasionally inquired about Sophia, the soil, and the crop. They gave a slow, straightforward response. Never go overboard, never go too quickly. They inquired about me at other occasions. Never about Gabriel, though. They were aware enough to keep the wound anonymous. They simply let it to recover naturally. Elena pulled out her photo albums one day. She gestured to a photograph of herself standing in front of a schoolhouse in black and white. With a hint of pride, she said, "Teacher, she and Nikos, both in their 20s, were shown in another photo carrying baskets of olives from the same orchard, but with younger trees. She posed the question while imitating typing with her fingers." I took out my phone and showed her some of my premarital design work, interiors that are clean, contemporary textures, items I hadn't examined in a long time. She looked at them with genuine curiosity. Softly grinning, she tapped her temple. She said, "Beautiful thinking." I hadn't heard that in years. Not Gabriel, not even me. Cooking with Elena was similar to picking up a new language, one that is communicated through memory and rhythm. She didn't follow any recipes. She made use of feel, a swoop of oil over sun-warmed veggies, a pinch of this, a handful of there. The first 2 loaves of bread were burned by me. She chuckled, ripped out a piece and still tasted it. She asserted that education is not a waste. In Boston, you had to clean up your mistakes quickly. They participated in the process here. I started to appreciate flaws in the bend of a loaf that is a little off-center, in the dirt scratch beneath my fingernails, in the crooked stitches of the scarf. I learned to knit from her. They were authentic. They belonged to me. The more I worked, the less Gabriel was on my mind. Not because the agony was gone. However, it had a destination. Into the ground, into the bread, into the bratatical, patient existence I was creating, one sincere day at a time. It took me 3 months to realize that I hadn't shed a tear in weeks. Not once. I hadn't prayed to the skies for clarification, hadn't recoiled when Boston was brought up, had not relived that cafe moment. I was too occupied, too exhausted, too full with actual objects. I was taken to the shed where the olives were squeezed one morning by Nikos and Elena. Simple glass bottles filled with golden green oil studded the walls. Their stock. Elena tapped a calendar on the wall and whispered, "Mark it." She gestured toward me. "You come." I assisted them in packing the old vehicle with crates. We took a car to the hamlet where vendors selling crafts, food, oils, and soaps ringed the square. They nodded to a visitor who was walking by and gave me a bottle. "Talk." I went cold. I began. "My Greek," Nikos whispered softly. "Try." So I did. Awkward, stumbling, and too cheerful. I did, however, sell 2 bottles. Next 3, we developed a groove by the afternoon. They took care of the money. I related the tales. Elena gave me a little envelope around sunset. "Your contribution," she said. "Euros are inside, not very much, but enough. Above all, mine, earned, honored, no conditions. For the first time in years, I had money that wasn't from Gabriel or that wasn't routed through his accounts. And like a kid with a treasure, I slept with it beneath my pillow that night, since it was. By then, the summer air had become softer. Evenings moved more slowly. It seemed as though the sun was reluctant to set. I didn't either. The days at the market became routine. People began calling me by name. The American? No, only Alexis. I was regarded more like a daughter who had never ceased returning home by Elena and Nikos than like a visitor. Elena asked me a question in her slow, deliberate English one evening while we were shelling peas on the porch. "Home," she said. "You go home." She gestured to the ocean, then gave her heart a tap. I took a while to respond. For me, the word home had begun to change. It no longer conjured up pictures of well-planned dinner parties or Boston brownstones. It carried the aroma of wood smoke and bread. After harvest, my hands hurt. Nikos nodded quietly when I correctly arranged the olives. Before I could stop them, tears pierced my eyes. Elena remained silent. She simply laid her hand across mine. "To put it another way, you just owe yourself an explanation." After a few days, I switched on my old phone. Not for everyone, for me. Months of stillness suddenly came crashing back in the form of emails.companions.coworkers. Concerned, wondering. One message was particularly clear, my previous mentor in design. She had sent my name to a sustainable architectural firm for a remote consulting position. The position remained unfilled. She had still made room for me. It had been months since I had given that aspect of myself any thought. But when I saw her name, I recalled my former self before I became his wife. Then I noticed it. What made my stomach turn was the subject line, "I am aware of your location." From Gabriel. 2 hours prior to the date. I made a click. I discovered you. Alexis, even though it took months and a professional investigator, enough is enough. On Thursday, I will take a plane to Athens. I'll be there to take you home. I gazed at the display. "Home," he said, as though he was still entitled to define it, as though I were a stray pet, and he needed to put an end to this dramatic outburst. With my phone in hand, I made my way to the kitchen. Elena's gaze shifted from the ledger. Her grin dimmed. "Unpleasant news." Gently, she inquired. I gave a nod. "Gabriel," the first said. "He's on his way." Her eyes squinted a little. Then she reached under the ledger and took out an envelope without saying a word, slid it to me across the table. Within, a collaboration agreement. Weeks ago, it was drawn up. Nikos, Elena, and now me signed it. I raised my head, according to her, for timing. We wait for the ideal time. This is the moment. The papers were in my lap. I was steady by their weight. These weren't only papers. They served as evidence that my floating had stopped, that I had actually constructed something, not only a place to stay, not merely surviving, a stake, a life, a decision. I walked to the local lawyer's office the following day. We created divorce documents in both Greek and English. Easy, just straightforward. I sent my mentor an email. I expressed my interest in the consulting position to her. I then took some time to write to my pals that I had ghosted, explaining the situation rather than apologizing. Short, sincere, no explanations, just the facts. Gabriel would arrive. However, he was unable to locate the woman he had abandoned. The sky was so clear on Thursday that it seemed symbolic. An ideal summer day in Greece. Nikos and I were in the shed evaluating samples of olive oil when we heard tires on gravel. Elena entered through the door. She whispered, "He's here." I used my apron to clean my hands, went outside. He was there, Gabriel, with his ironed shirt, fancy sunglasses, and that cologne-like expression of hazy irritation. He was leaning against a silver rental car as if he were posing for an advertisement. He took a while to notice me, which allowed me to visit him. See him for yourself. My calendar used to be dictated by this man, my clothes, my value. Now he appeared tiny, incongruous with the olive trees and stone walls. He blinked when he turned and saw me, strong, sun-tanned, and with my hair pushed back without apology. Alexis. In fact, he took a step back. "How did you fare?" Calmly, I grinned. "Life," I said. He smoothed his shirt in an attempt to gather himself. "To get you home, I'm here. Let's avoid creating a mess. I've expressed my regret," I answered. "You left me in a foreign country. As you did it. You left. You want me to go back in your car now as if nothing had happened." He let out a sigh. "Stop being dramatic. It was an error. Let's move on now that you've made your point." I gave a head shake. Making a point is not the goal here. The goal is to create a life. I sensed Elena and Nikos leaving the home behind me, silent observers. Gabriel saw them, scowled. "Have you been detained here? I've been learning from them regarding work, concerning trust, about my identity apart from you." His jaw dropped, closed after that. I reached into my pocket and took out the partnership documents, kept them waiting. "A part of this is now mine. I am not a visitor. I'm at home." His expression tensed. "This is absurd. You don't work as a farmer. You work as a designer. The city is where you belong," I said, funny, because I've never felt like I belonged here before. I took my other pocket out, retrieved the divorce documents, gave them to him. He gazed at them as if they were about to burn in his palms. He said, "You'll regret this, perhaps." I answered, "However, I would rather face the dangers of my own decisions than the assurance of yours." Gabriel was silent as he gazed at the divorce documents, once squared with confidence. His shoulders had started to slump. I just caught a glimpse of bewilderment behind his eyes, not regret, but incredulity, as though he was still unable to comprehend how this version of me developed. How the Italian woman he had left beside a cafe had turned into someone who didn't need anything from him anymore. Nikos moved forward behind me. In Greek, he said something that was firm, courteous, and conclusive. Gabriel gave me a look. What did he say? I inhaled. "After dark, the road back to Athens is hazardous," he said. "You ought to go immediately." For far too long, neither of us moved. Although there wasn't much distance between us, years passed. Without saying another word, he opened the car door, didn't dispute, didn't plead. He drove away, the dust curling behind him like the final breath of a lifeless thing. Elena grabbed my hand. My shoulder was touched by Nikos. We didn't talk. We didn't have to. We went in the direction of the house. Now my home, ours. Oil samples needed to be sorted. I have to make dinner. The market list to dot check, work, genuine, sincere labor. The kind that provided something back in exchange for something being demanded of you. I sat on the porch that night as the sun set behind the hills. Elena was knitting. Nikos lighted his pipe. Gabriel gave me the envelope, which was still unopened. What was within didn't interest me. I already had all the information I required. After supper, I burned it on the stove. Not because I was angry, no longer available, There are some stories that don't require additional development. What they came to teach, they have imparted. After that, they're finished. I went to the grove by myself the following morning. The air remained cold. Through the branches came the sound of birdsong. The gnats were waiting, folded. Between the trees, I strolled. I ran the bark between my fingertips. Each step served as a reminder. I'm present. I remained. This is what I decided on. Not because it was flawless. However, it was mine. Elena gave me a woven basket later that week. She said, "Yana made for you, our market lady." There was a note inside, carefully written in English, Alexis. "Welcome. You give life. You stay and you develop. We also develop." I closed my eyes and pressed the paper on my chest. I'd learned to keep things nice in Boston. I had figured out how to keep things alive here. Months went by. I began working remotely 2 days a week as a part-time employee of the design firm that my mentor had suggested, only enough to maintain a presence in that world. I didn't lose the sensation of the soil, though, or the sound of soup-related laughter, or the olive harvest's rhythm. For the bottles, we created fresh labels, easy, classy, bilingual. At the bottom of each was a name: Elena, Nikos, Alexis. A cooperation in rhythm as well as on paper, inside the family. Indecision. I occasionally receive emails from old pals. Images of winter in Boston. Invitations that I'm unlikely to accept. I respond courteously. I'm not conflicted, though, because I didn't find a getaway here. It was time to arrive. It's still a little house. The work is still challenging. However, I smell wood smoke and rosemary when I open the windows in the morning. I never have a knot in my stomach when I go to sleep. And when I gaze at myself in the mirror, I don't see someone who is lost, damaged, or abandoned. When love turned into harshness, I saw a woman who walked away from the table. Somebody placed anything in the ashes of the former existence after letting it burn. Something that develops. A feeding thing. Something that holds. Life doesn't always give second chances. It awaits the moment when you take the first genuine one. There are instances when the life you were destined to lead doesn't start until everything you counted on is gone. Sometimes it's a quiet moment on a foreign road when you realize no one is coming to save you. Other times, it's a dramatic decision. The true change starts at that point. It is not failure to leave behind what was familiar, even if it was hard. It's a comeback to your own voice, to your own hands, to a life where you don't have to endure, but choose. You don't require saving. All you have to do is have faith that beginning anew at any age can be the bravest thing you'll ever do.